There is an appropriate place in the desert where wind turbines could go, but the larger element is that Edison owns the transmission lines and there is no more capacity. You can talk about solar fields, wind generators, turbines, everything, and Edison says, fine. When are you going to build your transmission line? Because those great big cat towers you see running through the desert, they're already at capacity with the power coming from Boulder. And what little is available suddenly kills the market when you really start to look at it in the magnitude that people like China or overseas development firms are thinking about building power plants here in the U.S. Not going to happen.
Thank you, Bill Jensen. Joseph Napolitano, same question.
Yeah, I've got nothing against wind energy and all these green projects, but I do think they should be secondary to what we already have, and that's fossil fuels. And if we fully develop that, and then at the same time work on your green energy and get it perfected, and in time it'll happen. But right now, it's not time. And, but it's a free country. You want to have a thing in your backyard? I say go ahead. Okay with your neighbors. I understand you have to sign a form because they make noise. They make a humming noise or something, and then you have to get your neighbor to sign off. It's a free. I believe that in a free country, and if you want to power your house that way, praise the Lord, go for it. I don't got a problem with that.
Thank you, Joseph Napolitano.
If I get to Congress, if I'm lucky enough to get your vote and get to Congress, I'm going to learn a lot there. And one of the things that I'm going to learn are things that Jim Jensen talked about. Namely, you have to understand that a project like that is a complex project. It's all well and good to talk about putting up the machinery, but you have to have the transmission lines. One of the little sidebar things, let me just tell you, for example, I understand that Rockefeller built this great wealth not on owning the oil fields and the machines, but owning the means of transmission of the fossil fuels. So these kinds of things are very complex problems, and you got to look at the total picture, and I appreciate Jim pointing that out. Thank you. So I would be against this, yeah, unless we have the total package.
Thank you, Dr. George Craig. Angela Reyes.
Well, first I would ask why wind? There's so much more efficient and less evasive forms of energy out there. I've actually studied wind turbines, and the maintenance and operating costs are just far outweigh something like solar panels. So I would have a problem with populating an area with wind turbines, especially if it's going to be invasive on your neighbors. I don't think that would be right. But if it was in an area where no one's going to build around and the land is far away from people, I wouldn't have a problem.
Thank you, Angela Reyes. Ryan McCaffrey.
Drill, baby, drill. Why, you know what? Why don't we just fund another Solyndra, give them another $500 million from whoever wins the lottery on Friday, and build these windmills that we'll put up throughout the desert. Look, if projects are to be permitted in this state, they're not going to be funded by the federal government. I will vote against that 100% every single time. Biggest mistake the federal government ever made in this president was to fund Solyndra, and $500 million of taxpayer money gone overnight.
Thank you, Ryan McCaffrey.
I'm not opposed to wind, solar, or anything else, but I'm telling you, if it wasn't government subsidized, we wouldn't see any of these blades flying out here. And if it wasn't government subsidized, we wouldn't see any solar panels out here. I say if it's on private property and it's private sector money, and that's it, I'm for it. But I'm telling you, it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for government subsidies. I will never sign for a single dollar to subsidize any kind of alternate energy.
Sure this is out of line, but Mr. Imus, would you subsidize oil? Would you subsidize? There's a lot of other things that are propped up right now. We all know that are subsidized by the government right now. So
that was for 30 seconds of rebuttal.
Is that my?
Yeah.
Yeah, would you like to go on with the question and answer?
Thank you, ma'am. I built an alternative style house because I believe that individually we can make a difference. I like my Republican brothers that think that individual makes a difference. I love that. I made a difference with our house. Okay, we built it in a way, and you're going to see on our website when it's complete, you're going to love it. You're going to go, oh, wow, he's thinking outside the box. It's about time we have something like that. There are ways that individually we can make a difference. Now, I wish the government would have got out of my way when I was building, because it was a heck of a lot of work to convince everybody I should build it this way. But 20 years later, I still live in that house and raise my family there. So I support individual initiative. I'm not sure that I want to have 1 million blades. I'm not sure about that, because I love the desert the way it is.
Thank you, John Peterson. Anthony Allen.
I'm actually opposed to the promulgation of the wind mills. I don't think that they are particularly effective in terms of what they deliver. The problem that we have with our energy resources is we need a 24-hour around-the-clock cycle of energy, and wind doesn't provide that, which means that at best, wind is one part of a larger equation. But if you've been out towards the lower desert, if you've seen the massive amounts of windmills that are out there, and how they blight literally hundreds of acres, it makes that entire area uninhabitable. It is a completely ugly thing to see, and it produces so very little energy compared to what we could be doing if we actually had the courage to say nuclear is not a bad idea, or that fossil fuels can be made clean, and then we get on board with making sure that we take advantage of the resources that we have. America has a great amount of resources, and a tremendous amount, more so than most people give it credit for, but we don't utilize them. We have the ability to, and I think fundamentally we should be tapping into the resources we have before we start blighting the entire desert.
Thank you, Anthony Allen.
Sidebar, just to be a little lighter note on the topic there, I'm surprised nobody talked about these windmills killing birds. I heard one of our green people a couple of days ago complaining about that. They killed the birds. So that's not such a good idea.
Spending is always on my mind. That's the only way you can achieve a balanced budget. I don't spend. There's no other way. But you have to look at every situation. I can't sit here and tell you I know everything that's going on in 1,000 bills written in Washington. That's ridiculous. I don't think anybody in Congress knows either. So you have to take them one by one, I think, and rate each one on its own merits. And I would err on the side of lower spending than higher taxes. We tax ourselves into oblivion essentially without even knowing it. And so it's not a really easy question to answer, but I would tend to want to cut spending and not raise taxes. I would lean heavily in that direction.
Thank you, Joseph Napolitano. Dr. George Craig.
Yeah, thank you. I remember running against Jerry Lewis in 94, 96, 98, and it was interesting to me that I observed every time that I ran how the budget, I think it was for a total amount of expenditure for medical care, was 800 billion, then it was $1 trillion, then it was 1.2 trillion. Now it's up to about $2 or $3 trillion that we're expending. So I think on that, that's my comment. We've got to cut the spending. I agree with the comments made by others that the first rule is to cut the spending before we worry about raising taxes. Because it certainly is true, I think, if we learn from experience, that the only thing that's going to happen with our people in Washington, by and large, if we raise more, if we increase taxes, is that they're going to spend more money. We don't want to do that.
Thank you, Dr. George Craig.
Definitely stop the spending. In city government, I knew that the city had money, and the government has money. You just have to find it. And we can't spend what we don't have. We need to mainstream the inefficiencies. We need to stop the duplication of services and champion smaller government. And that's going to solve a lot of our problems, is abolishing the Federal Cash Reserve, the Department of Education, taking down the EPA. There's so many things that we can go after to save money. And if you spend, if you raise taxes, the more you have, the more you spend. You see it in your own household. They do it up in Washington.
Thank you.
Well, I agree with my colleagues up here. Cut spending. We've done that in the city of Victorville. We've reduced our employees by over 200. in the last 3 years through layoffs, and folks, that's not a fun thing to do, but we made the tough decisions, we did it. You have to reduce spending, and we balanced our budget in the city of Victorville. I think we can do it at the federal level. I believe in the balanced budget amendment. I think we need to have that as part of our Constitution, and it needs to be implemented. And Congress needs to be held accountable. I'm completely fine with going without pay if we do not balance the budget, pass the budget. I mean, I don't know why we have gone over some 1,200 days without passing a budget. The president puts forward a budget that makes absolutely no sense. Congress doesn't, acts on it, but votes against it. They try to put out their own budgets. Nothing ever gets done back there in Washington, D.C. We need to get something done. We need to balance the budget.
Thank you.
These issues seem so complicated and deep, but they're really not. Because at the heart of every issue is simple. The government has to live like we do at home. And this economy's down, and all of us are making a lot less than we were a few years ago. And the government's got to learn to live on less too. I think we're overtaxed. I will never vote for a tax increase. I think we need to look how to bring tax relief to the American people. And I would never vote ever to raise our national debt ceiling. They said if the debt goes up, if we don't vote for that, it'll shut down the government. I say shut it down. They've got to live within their means.
Back in '98, I stood out again. I ran against Barbara Boxer. I lost. And I stood for a balanced budget amendment. I still believe that we should live within our means. I believe that when a family sits down around the kitchen table and decides what's important, what's not, we prioritize. But I don't always agree with my Republican brothers on what things should be cut. I don't think everything goes on the table. I think some things are too important to go on the table to be cut. I think education is one of those things. I personally have benefited from education, as all of my esteemed colleagues here have. I don't want to deny that to my fellow Americans, the opportunities that each and every one of us have had up here. I don't want to do that.
Thank you, John.
No question the answer involves cuts. We have to make difficult and hard cuts. And John Pinkerton's right. It's not easy to make those decisions. Make no mistake about it. We all agree that cuts need to be made. Everyone in this room agrees cuts should be made, but that's not the problem. The problem is finding out how we come to a consensus on which cuts to make. Are we going to cut our military spending? Are we going to cut our social service spending? Are we going to cut education spending, health and human service spending, environmental spending? The list goes on and on and on of things that we need to be looking at, and that are all on the table. I absolutely believe that the size of government, I think the latest projected number is 1.027, is the hopeful number. That's the hopeful number that we can be at for a budget for this next federal budget year. That number is huge, but we can get there only by working together. I think it was said once up here already, and I want to repeat that point. You can't do this alone. No one member is going to cast a vote that's going to change it. It's working collectively to make real hard decisions that is going to solve this problem and get the budget under control.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the pushback starts here. Be clear a little bit between the state and the Fed, but make no mistake. No law shall be implemented except through Congress. Yet the EPA, the California Air Resources Board, Air Quality Management Districts, Department of Interior, Department of Energy, Department of Education, at least take that and send it back to the states where we can decide what to do with our money. All tax regulations. These regulations are laws in reality, and they have absolutely crushed business as we know it, and the ability for anybody to come in and start a new business. You can't even have a lemonade stand without a permit anymore. The Budget Committee with Paul Ryan has a start. It may not be perfect, but he has a start. He has a plan. You can look at it right now. He can support Paul Ryan. We can rewrite the Federal Reserve policy and how the Fed creates debt and cut off Congress from the money tree. We can pass a balanced budget amendment, and we can do what Newt Gingrich said, and Ron Paul and Paul Ryan, and we can cut government, and that will cut the spending and allow us the tax relief that we need.